Winter U.S. tour as Joe Elliott gets better from his voice issues. We'll touch on that, but predominantly want to talk about the loss of Jimmy Bain, as we've been doing throughout this entire show here on Eddie Trunk Live on Trunk Nation. And joining me now live on the phone line to discuss Jimmy Bain and much more is Vivian Campbell. Hey, Viv, how are you, man?
Well, not too bad, Eddie. It's been a strange month.
Yeah, no doubt.
Yeah.
No doubt. And of course, before we get to Jimmy, made stranger by the fact that you guys just had to basically cancel the rest of your dates for now, right? For Def Leppard?
Yeah, we're going to try and reschedule those for May, is what we're looking at. And, it was a case of cutting our losses. Joe was trying to struggle through this situation he has, and he saw a doctor in Miami right after the cruise, and kind of was led to believe that he could continue, and kind of sing through it, and that it would he'd get through the worst of it. And then in Orlando the other day, he went to see a specialist who stuck a camera down his throat and told him that if he didn't stop singing now, he was going to do irreparable damage. So, it was unfortunate. I mean, and that's why it was really, really last minute, because literally the rest of us, Sav and Rick and Phil and myself were on stage sound checking in Orlando at about 4 o'clock on Saturday afternoon while Joe was at the doctor. And he came back and he told us the news, so we kind of had no choice, I know a lot of people were very disappointed, as indeed we are, but, we want to continue with Leppard and hopefully, have some successful live shows in years to come. So we kind of really had to do this and take some time off. And it's been a really, really long year. I mean, we toured pretty extensively last year. We did, I think it was 102 shows in 2015, which was a lot for us. And, that's the way it rolls.
Yeah, this all started, of course, on the Def Leppard cruise when Joe was unable to sing, and you guys made the best of that situation using Eric Martin and Kip Winger and your own singer in Last in Line, Andrew Freeman, and of course you and Phil, I thought, sang brilliantly, singing lead vocals, trading off there on Hysteria. But obviously you need Joe there, and it's a tough situation. And I had emailed him a couple days ago, and he said, we're going to soldier on, but I'm sick and have to deal with this. Do you know, Vivian, if they told him, is it just an illness, or does he need a procedure, or did they tell him what's actually wrong?
No, he doesn't. Fortunately, he does not need to do surgery. It's just really fatigue. I can't remember the exact medical term for it, but basically about 50% of his vocal cords are just in such a state that if he doesn't stop now, he's going to screw up 100% of them. So the doctor that he did see, the specialist that he did see, is very confident that if he just doesn't sing for a few months, he'll be all right. So it's not like he needs a procedure. There's no nodes on his vocal cords or anything like that.
Right.
It hasn't gotten to that stage.
All right. Well, we wish him well, and hopefully he gets that behind him, because he had been singing so well in the last couple tours as well, leading up to this. So
Indeed.
Hopefully he can get some rest and get this taken care of. So let's move on to the business at hand. And of course, it's very sad and very tragic. And obviously, we spent time together right around the whole thing happening. But obviously, the passing of Jimmy Bain, who is a guy that, for you, I talked to Andrew Freeman earlier, and he has a different perspective. His first real experience dealing with Jimmy was when Last in Line came together. But for you, of course, it goes way, way back. And share with the audience, if you will, Viv, about the first time you met Jimmy, because it was actually him and Ronnie James Dio that were originally the band that reached out to you, right?
Yeah, well, I met Jimmy. Jimmy was in a band called Wild Horses after Rainbow, and that was a band that he formed with Brian Robertson from Thin Lizzy, right after Robbo had quit Lizzy. And they did a couple of albums for EMI and toured Europe and Japan. And during that time, it would have been 1981, I guess, they came to Ireland. Maybe it was early 82. I honestly can't remember exactly when, but it was the very early 1980s, and they came to Ireland, and did a few shows, and my band, my first band, Sweet Savage, we basically opened for every rock band that came to Ireland, be it Motorhead or Thin Lizzy or Wishbone Ash or Wild Horses or whomever. We were the ones they always called, to come and open for these rock acts, and that's when I first met Jimmy. And it's not like I gave him a phone number or anything, but he remembered me, and he obviously liked something about my playing. And then, fast forward several months, and I get this call in the middle of the night. My father got the call, because my father's name was also Vivian. My father died 6 years ago, but so Vivian Campbell. There weren't too many of us in the phone book, and Jimmy looked us up, and he called, and it was the middle of the night, and woke my father up, and I just remember my father coming around and waking me up when I was, about 19 or 20 at the time, and he said to me, there's a drunken Scotsman on the phone for you. So I went downstairs and I took the call, and Jimmy's on the phone, and he's telling me, hey, it's me, it's Jimmy Bain, remember from Wild Horses? And he says, I'm here in a hotel room in London. He says, with Ronnie, James Dio, and Vinny Appice. So, this was all quite surreal, to be woken in the middle of the night by someone you barely knew, who you'd met briefly, and, he's in a hotel room with, these major rock stars. And at the time, I got just to backtrack a little bit, I wasn't a huge Black Sabbath fan, but at the time I was really into the Heaven and Hell record, and I was listening to it in the car over and over again, so... And, Long Live Rock and Roll was big with me, and going back further, Rainbow Rise and all that stuff. So, Ronnie Dio was a big, big star to me, and as were Jimmy and Vinny, and so getting this call in the middle of the night was completely surreal. And so basically, in a nutshell, Jimmy said to me, so Ronnie and Vinny are here. They've quit Black Sabbath. They want to form a new band, and I'm going to play bass for them, and they're looking for a guitar player, and I've recommended you. So I said, well, thanks. So what happens next? And he said, well, can you fly to London tomorrow? And bear in mind, I grew up in Belfast, so I'm in Northern Ireland. I had to buy a plane ticket and fly to London, and I didn't have the money for it. So I said, well, I'll see what I can do. I'll call you back in the morning. So in the morning, I spoke to my father, and despite being woken in the middle of the night by some anonymous drunken Scotsman, he generously bought me the ticket, because he knew how much it meant to me. He knew that this was a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. So I took my Les Paul, and I flew to London, and I met Ronnie and Vinny and Jimmy at a hotel, and it was very bizarre. And we went to a rehearsal room, a place called John Henry's in North London, and I rented a Marshall amp, and we tuned up and we played. And Ronnie had, at that time, he had written the song Holy Diver. And Ronnie wasn't a great guitar player. He actually could play a bit of bass, and I think that he had written the song on bass. So he picked up Jimmy's bass, and he was kind of showing me that and showed me the arrangement. And so we played the song, and we jammed for about 20 or 30 minutes, just playing Holy Diver over and over and over again. It was the longest jam, and it was that was the sound of the band. There was an immediate chemistry that was undeniable. Jimmy and Vinny really locked together as a rhythm section, and I happened to slip right in there, and Ronnie liked what he heard. So that was the night that the band was born, and I owe it to Jimmy for giving me that break, So
and your dad for giving you the plane ticket.
Of course, yeah. Well, yeah, and much more. Both my parents were very, very supportive of my desire to do this for a living, despite the fact that I had a horrible time at school, and I didn't do well, and many other parents wouldn't have been as understanding or as accommodating or as forgiving as mine were. I was very, very, very fortunate in that regard, so luck of the Irish.
Yeah. One of the things that I've been kind of stressing with people is that Jimmy Bain was a guy that was so important to the bands he was in as a player and as a writer, but he was never the out front guy. He was never the guy that was the star of the bands. He seemed to me, and I certainly knew him, but not nearly as well as you did or or Vinny did. But he seemed to be very content in that role. He seemed like he was fine with not being the star of the band. He seemed fine to just kind of lay in the back and play his bass and contribute what he did on the records and what have you. He didn't seem like a guy that really sought out the spotlight. Would that be accurate, Viv?
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, Jimmy was very, very much a team player, and he was a great writer, and I think a lot of people don't realize that about him. They just think of him as a bass player in these bands that he was in, but he contributed a lot, and even when he's not credited, I know for a fact, because I was there, that there were several songs from the early Dio records that Jimmy contributed heavily to that he's not credited on. He was that kind of person. He never thought about it from a selfish point of view. He just was very, very musical, and that was his life. He just wanted to be part of that, part of the creative process. And he was a giver, He would always just, he was generous in every sense of the word, and he was generous with his time, with whatever money and possessions he had, and with his talent. He just kept giving. So he was a great person to know, I got to say.
Talking about his ability as a writer and his contributions that many people may not realize, you told me a great story about Rainbow in the Dark and the keyboard lick in that, and how he wrote that and how that came up. And for this audience, if you retell that story, I think it's a great one.
Well, we recorded everything that we were writing in the early Dio days. We had a little Fostex 4-track thing always going. So it was basically the four of us in a rehearsal room. It was Ronnie, Vinny, Jimmy, and myself, and Angelo, our Curie, who was our engineer. And Angelo would run the little Fostex, so he'd be stopping and starting the 4-track machine, and then we'd listen to what we had, and we'd play it back through the PA. And in the corner of the room, we had a keyboard set up for whatever embellishments, because Ronnie liked to dabble on a keyboard too, and so there was a little Yamaha DX7 set up, and it was playing back through the PA, and we'd basically recorded the first iteration of Rainbow in the Dark, and it's playing back to us, and Ronnie's rolling a joint and doing what he did and kicking it in the corner of the room, and Jimmy wanders up to the DX7, to the Yamaha, and he's got a drink in one hand, a Jim Beam and Coke, which was his signature drink. He was always on that, and a Marlboro in the other hand, and so he holds a drink in his left hand, he puts a Marlboro between his lips, and while the song's playing, he walks up to the keyboard and starts playing the da-da-da-da-da-da-da, and Ronnie just went nuts. Ronnie jumped up from the seat and pointed at him and going, yes, 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 that's the lick, that's the hook for the song. And it was such a simple kind of little melody that a keyboard player would probably not have come up with, because a keyboard player, like any guitar player, like any instrumentalist, we all tend to over-embellish, and that's our downfall, is that we don't always necessarily gravitate to the simplicity of melody. We're kind of prisoners of our own abilities, I guess, and we always just want to kind of naturally go there and overly complicate things. And Jimmy, as a bass player playing keyboard, just naturally distilled the essence of the melody and the hook, and so that's when the hook of the song was born. And then we went in, we actually recorded the track a few weeks later, and Jimmy played the keyboard part, because it was a simple one-handed part, and it's not like we actually needed a keyboard player to play it. So
yeah, and the other thing I wanted to ask you about was the hearing aid recording for Stars, because did you and Jimmy both write that song, actually, or what was the story? He had a big hand in that, didn't he?
Yeah, well, it all happened by accident, like so many things in my career. Like even the Last in Line project itself it wasn't something I sat down and thought about and let's do this. It just kind of evolved. And then the same thing was with the Stars project. Jimmy and I, at the time, in the early Dio days, Jimmy and I shared an apartment. We were roommates, which in itself I could write a book, but that was just nuts. And someday I will, hopefully. But we for whatever reason, we were at KLOS, the big rock station here in LA, and it was just me and Jimmy, and we were talking, and it was a week or two after the the Michael Jackson project had come out, the We Are the World thing. And the DJ just kind of asked a question. He said, how come no one in the hard rock community was asked to take part in this whole We Are the World thing? And we all kind of looked at each other for a second and kind of came to the same conclusion that even back then, although hard rock was very, very, very successful and selling millions of records and whatnot, it just wasn't accepted, it wasn't getting Grammys, it wasn't getting any sort of recognition. And Jimmy just said, yeah, we should just do one for the hard rock community only. And he instantly, like without skipping a beat, he said, yeah, we should call it Hearing Aid. So we all thought this was ridiculously funny, and we rolled around and laughed for a minute or so. And then afterwards, when Jimmy and I were driving back to our apartment, we kind of said, well, actually, let's really do this, let's do something about this. We know enough people to actually make this happen. So we went back to our apartment and we wrote the song that night. And the following day we took it to Ronnie, because at the time we were recording the Sacred Heart record, we were in the studio, and we took the idea to Ronnie and we played him the song. And to be honest, at first Ronnie really wasn't interested. His head was so much involved in doing the Sacred Heart album, which he was not only the lead singer of, but Ronnie also produced the album, so he was, very, very heavily invested in it. And so we kind of thought for a week or two nothing happened with it, and we thought, well, we give it a go, so be it. And then a couple of weeks later, they came back to us, Ronnie and Wendy, and they'd obviously discussed it and thought it was worth pursuing, and Ronnie wrote the lyric. And from that point on, for several weeks, I just started working the phones. I started cold calling people that I didn't even know, many of whom actually ended up participating in it, and many of whom didn't. But I just used whatever connections we had to try and track down people's phone numbers and hey, you don't know me, but I'm Vivian Campbell. I play guitar with Ronnie Dio and blah blah blah. We're doing this thing, and fortunately, many people did actually agree to participate in it, and we just called in favors all around, and Jimmy was very, very personable, as you know, and he was very, very good at securing free studio time and free car services and free accommodation, free everything that we just didn't have money to pay for stuff to make this happen. But we had to kind of talk people into coming to LA or coming to the studio if they already lived in LA, and we utilized whatever we had to make this thing happen, and eventually it did, which was quite amazing in and of itself,
After that period of Sacred Heart, of course, the original Dio band started to break up, and Jimmy would go back and forth a few times with Ronnie. But, how much did you stay in touch with Jimmy in the decades that went by as you went off and did different things? Obviously, you guys came together and made this great record and put this band Last in Line together. But prior to that, leading up to it, were you guys always in touch, or did you not speak for a long time, or how close were you?
We were always close, but we were never always in touch, We'd see each other around LA every now and again. But no, we weren't in touch as such, but we never had a falling out. Jimmy and Vinny and I always had some sort of an understanding with each other. It was difficult for us all after the Dio thing. It was as difficult for them as it was for me. It wouldn't have been appropriate for us to be in contact for those immediate years after that. But we always, and we always continue to have an affection and an affinity for each other. So we were always close.
So when the idea came together and we've talked in the past about getting this band together and how it came together and how it's evolved from basically a band that's playing early Dio material to now a band that is about to release a phenomenal album of original material. When this idea first came together, Jimmy was up for it, I imagine, immediately. Who made the approach to him when you guys first set out to kind of do Last in Line?
Well, in early 2011, I went on tour with Thin Lizzy because Leopard had taken a year or so off, and I had nothing to do. And Scott Gorham called me up and said, would you be interested in coming out as a stunt guitar player within Lizzie? And I didn't have to think about that for a second, because Lizzie were just such an influence on me in my formative years as a guitar player. And so I went on tour. We did a European tour. We did some shows on the East Coast of America for several months. And, it just reconnected me to who it is I am and what it is I do. And that's, a guy who throttles the life out of a Les Paul. So I came back off of that, and I just wanted to play guitar, because being on stage with Brian Downey and Scott Gorham and playing Black Rose really kind of brought me back to that time, So as soon as I came back from that, I got in touch with Jimmy and I got in touch with Vinny, and I said, let's go into a room and play, and that's what we did. We went into a rehearsal room. We started playing early Dio songs, and it was immediate. The chemistry had never left. It was so exciting, and I got goosebumps, and we all got goosebumps and got excited about it. So we played for a few hours. We took a break, and Vinny said, we need a singer to, complete this, to make it just the real deal. And he suggested Andrew. Andrew at the time was still living in Los Angeles, so he gave him a call. He came down, and that was the first time I met Andy. He walked in, and he just blew me away because he was a powerful singer. You need to be a really, really strong singer to sing on top of Jimmy Bain and Vinny Appice and me, because we make a lot of racket. And Andy came in, and he really did it justice, but it was a very different kind of thing, and he didn't sound anything like Ronnie. And the fact that he didn't sound like Ronnie is what got me thinking. I thought, well, here you have the original band that sounds unmistakably like the early Dio records, and you have a singer who can sing on top of it but sounds nothing like Ronnie. And I just thought it was an interesting juxtaposition, to do that. And so we decided to go out and do some shows playing those early songs. And, we had no ambition at all other than to have fun, and that's all it was about. And then, we did it sporadically for a year or two, and then we finally got this offer from Frontiers to see if we were interested in writing and recording new music. And so we decided to give it a go, and I'm happy to say that it was a very easy and a very organic process, and we chose a great producer in Jeff Pilson. That just turned out to be a really, really fantastic relationship, and we knew it was going to be a fun record to make, and we knew it was going to be a good record, but I'm very happy to say that it far exceeded all of our expectations. We're all very, very proud of it, and I know Jimmy was too, and Jimmy was fully invested in this album, and what's more, he was fully sober. I'd like to make that point. Now having gotten confirmation that he actually died from lung cancer, it's especially sad that so many people rush to judgment on the internet, and were saying things like, he died with a needle in his arm and he was a junkie and whatnot. And it's absolutely untrue. He was very focused and very, very invested in this record, very, very involved in this record too. So I think it's nice that he went out on a high, so to speak, and nothing to do with drugs.
Well, yeah, exactly. I remember you telling me when you first started working on this project, you'd said to me, he's sober. I remember I saw him. I guess last time I saw him previous to that there was a event for the 5th anniversary of Ronnie James Dio's passing, which I hosted in LA, and Jimmy was there. And I forget who he was with at the time, but they said, yeah, Jimmy's doing well and he's sober. And I know that you had mentioned that to me when you started working with him as well. But the internet, as it is. And of course, let's be honest, Jimmy lived a hard life. He hit it pretty hard throughout his career. Yep. People make these assumptions, but I do know that it was just recently announced that I guess he didn't even realize he had lung cancer. When I saw him a little over a week ago, when you guys played at the pre-party, he had come up to me and said hello, and he said, don't get too close. I'm just getting over pneumonia. But maybe he didn't even have pneumonia. Maybe it's easy to speculate now, but maybe it was in the throes of this lung cancer, which I don't even know if he knew he had.
Yeah, I don't think he was aware. But that's the state of healthcare in this country.
It's sad.
It's like if you're rich, you survive. If you're poor, you don't. And Jimmy, unfortunately, through one circumstance and another, had very, 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 very little means. and certainly no health insurance, you know. And but then again, you know, knowing Jimmy the way I knew him, even if he had known, I don't know if Jimmy would have done anything about it, you know. He just would have said, fuck it, you know, pour me a drink, light me a cigarette, show me which way to the stage, you know.
Well, you know, that's the other thing, Viv, and we talked about this on the ship, because on the cruise, everybody was faced with this situation where we had a room full of people expecting to see a Last in Line show, and I had to walk out and break this news to them, and a very different event happened. But it was an event that I think everybody did the best they could with, and doing a memorial to him, and you guys all sharing some great stories and putting up the videos and the photo montage and stuff like that. So, but you know, in talking to everybody about it and learning more about Jimmy through talking to you guys, it definitely seems that way, that he just had a kind of carefree spirit about life. And when you think about his life and the music he created and what he's leaving, what he's left us with, which is this phenomenal album, Heavy Crown with Last in Line. I mean, it's a hell of a final statement, and something that, as you said many times, I mean, beyond playing bass, he was fully immersed in, he was fully engaged in, and contributed on many, many levels.
Yeah, he was a great writer. You know, we decided at the start of this record that we were just going to split every song 4 ways. So there's going to be no ego, no ulterior motives. We just walked in there, and it didn't matter if the idea came from Andrew or from Vinny or from me or from Jimmy. It was just, you know, we were a team, and that's what makes for the best records. You know, in many regards, that was somewhat the spirit that we went in to make Holy Diver with back in late 1982, you know, or at least that's what we thought when we started it. But, you know, that was Jimmy. That was how he wanted to work, and we were all on the same page with it. You know, he was at his happiest when he was playing with his friends and when he was writing, particularly. You know, and he was strong to the end. I mean, he was a true warrior. You know, Jimmy was from the Highlands in Scotland, and he's the true Highlander. You know, forget Mel Gibson. You know, it's Jimmy being. He's the one who died with his boots on. You know.
Hey, Viv, before I let you go, have you guys thought about what you're going to do now going forward with Last in Line, now that he's not there? I mean, on the ship, you did pull together a set at the end to kind of pay tribute to him, and Eric Brittingham from Cinderella filled in and helped you out there. But going forward, you know, you got to think about that at some point. Has there been discussion as to what you think you want to do?
Well, it's still raw, Eddie, you know, it's still early days, but the one thing is, as you mentioned, I mean, it's a very, very strong record, you know, and we owe it to Jimmy to do something with it. We had booked a tour that was to start in early March and go through April in the U.S. We're not going to do that anymore. That would just be wrong. But we are going to work this record in one way or another, you know, and we believe it deserves that. I mean, actually, the record had been in the can for almost a year, and we postponed its release because all of us collectively, the 4 of us, had wanted to wait until our schedules allowed for us to promote this record and tour behind it. And it's very sad and very ironic that, you know, we finally get to this time and Jimmy passes away, but we owe it to him, we owe it to each other to do what we can to let this record be heard. So we'll do something, but I don't know when or where or with whom. You know, that's all yet to be determined. And
have you guys heard anything? Is there any sort of service or public memorial or anything fans can do? You know, will there be any sort of has there been any announcement as to any sort of service for him yet?
Well, funny you should mention that. I you know, it was particularly sad to me that the news of his death was reported on social media before his family found out. we were on a ship at sea. I don't know about anyone else. I'm with AT&T, and I got to say they're the worst phone service in the world. I had no phone service whatsoever, but apparently on the ship, if you had T-Mobile, you could make calls, and that's kind of how it started. Some idiot texted someone that Jimmy had died. That someone happened to tell someone else who told someone else who posted it on Facebook. So Jimmy's daughter in London found out that her father was dead through social media, and it was immensely sad. And I eventually got her number, and I called her a couple of days after the fact, and we've been in touch since on the phone and through email. And between Jimmy's daughter Samantha and Vinny and our Last in Line's manager Steve Strange and myself, we've been trying to organize a service for him. His body, as of this morning, is still stuck in Miami. It's just been a logistical nightmare trying to get it to Los Angeles, where we all want him to be buried. So that said, and this is so typical of Jimmy. Jimmy was late to everything in his life, and now even in death, he's late to his own fucking funeral. And that kind of sums it all up. But we're hoping we can get his body here. Maybe if we can get things arranged by next weekend, we can actually get him buried.
Yeah, your manager, Last in Line manager Steve, was in touch with me today, and I believe he did say that he is finally making his way back there today.
Better late than Jimmy being, yeah, typical. But that hopefully we'll get the funeral service arranged for next weekend, and we do want to do a memorial for him. In typical and true Jimmy Bean fashion. That'll be like a full-on jam, with lots of jokes and lots of stories and probably lots of alcohol.
Yeah.
So I don't know. That would obviously be somewhere further down the road, but it would be nice to be able to celebrate Jimmy,
Yeah, for sure. Well, that's what we're trying to do a little bit here. Just before I let you go, Viv, you got a little time off then, it sounds like, in the foreseeable future.
Yes, I do, and I got to say I'm okay with that. It was a busy year in 2015, so that's all right.
And your health is okay? You're still hanging in there?
I can tell you, Eddie, with hand on heart, my health is the least of my concerns. Really, it is.
Okay.
It's all good. Everything is going as well as it can, and I'm one of the lucky ones. I'm one step ahead of my cancer, and I can afford to pay for it, which unfortunately Jimmy couldn't. That's the sad truth,
Well, from that original deal, band, it's just you and Vinny, so we got to make sure you guys stay healthy and keep it up, going out there and playing and kicking some ass. We need you guys. So
well, we're not going anywhere yet.
Good.
It's all good.
Good.
All
right, my friend. Well, listen. Again, my condolences, and I think that on the cruise, it was unfortunate too. You talk about the internet. A couple days after we got back from the cruise, I found a video of me on TMZ announcing Jimmy's passing, and the headline that TMZ put up was, Def Leppard cruise from hell in typical and sensationalized fashion. And it was hell in the sense that we lost Jimmy, but I think that that's a very, very, very erroneous sort of way to classify what, outside of some obstacles, what otherwise was a really good time for a lot of people, that everybody made the best of the situation. The weather wasn't great, nothing you can do about that. Joe lost his voice, well, they saw something very unique. The real tragedy was losing Jimmy, but I think as a ship and the people on board, most of them I talked to still had a great time.
Yeah, well, the thing is, Eddie, life is never scripted, so it's how you react to it that really defines it.
Yeah.
So, yeah, it didn't go as planned, but, you adapt and you move on, the world continues to turn and life goes on, and that's the human condition, you make the best of it.
Well, listen, man, keep us posted on what you hear about Jimmy and what you're going to do going forward with the band and all that sort of stuff. Again, I know it's all still very raw and everybody's still trying to figure stuff out, but my condolences on his passing, and, everybody should at the very least pick up this record for not for any other reason, but to listen to the quality of music along with yourself and Andrew and Vinny that Jimmy gave us right up till his last days. I mean, the album is truly phenomenal, and I think it's a great final testament to Jimmy's talents.
Well, thank you, Eddie. Yeah, and we think so too, and more importantly, so did Jimmy. You know,
Yeah.
I'd say be very, very proud of this record. So,
All right, man. Well, I'm going to play a track from it for people to hear right now. We played earlier when we had Andrew was on earlier. We played Devil in Me. I think I'm going to play Martyr for everybody right now, and then I'm going to back that up. Here's what we're doing: a little Jimmy Bain set. I'm going to play Last in Line. Then I'm going to play Stars Hearing Aid, and then I'm going to play Stargazer from Rainbow, because people also, we can't overlook the fact that this guy was also part of Rainbow and their, in my opinion, definitive album Rising.
absolutely, yeah.
I remember when Joe Elliott was the first to tell me that Jimmy had passed away, and I looked at Joe, and the first thing I looked at him, I said to him, my God, this is the guy who played on Stargazer. You know, I mean, the enormity of that alone is just incredible. So,
Yeah, Jimmy had a great catalog of work. Yeah.
yeah, and I think people have to, it's good for people to acknowledge and to re-recognize how much he's given us. So we'll do some Hearing Aid, we'll do some Last in Line, and we'll do some Rainbow as we remember Jimmy Bain. Thanks for your time, man. Stay in touch, okay?
Thank you, Eddie.
All right, take care.
Cheers.
Bye-bye. Vivian Campbell, everybody, covering a lot of ground there about, of course, the passing of Jimmy Bain, who he played with in Dio and was playing with right up till his last days last week in Last in Line. And also the very brand new news that just came out earlier today that Def Leppard's tour is postponed the rest of the way as Joe Elliott battles some vocal issues, which sounds like, according to Viv, just really is going to require some rest and getting himself healthy as far as vocal ability is concerned. So that's what's going on in that world. And one more interview tonight to come as we continue to discuss and celebrate Jimmy Bain throughout the show. Do some other stuff as well. As a matter of fact, we'll get some of your calls on.